Have you ever had someone laugh at your biggest day? Not because they were happy, because they wanted you to fail. That was my mother. And on the day of my wedding, she made sure everyone knew exactly how little she thought of me. But by the end of that same day, she was the one fighting back tears, because the man she mocked turned out to be the last person she expected. My name is Emily Parker, and this is the story of how my mother humiliated me at my wedding, then panicked when she learned who my husband really was. Growing up, I was never my mother's favorite. That title belonged to my younger sister, Rachel. Rachel was beautiful, popular, confident, everything my mother wanted in a daughter. And me? I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the daughter who worked hard instead of demanding attention. No matter what I achieved, Rachel always received more praise. If I got an A, Rachel got a celebration for a B. If I earned a scholarship, Rachel got compliments for showing up. I learned very young that my mother's approval was a prize I would never win. Years later, when I met Daniel, things got worse. Daniel wasn't rich, at least not on the surface. He drove an old truck, lived in a modest apartment, worked long hours, and never talked about money. My mother immediately hated him, not because he was rude, not because he treated me badly, but because she believed he wasn't successful enough. Meanwhile, Rachel dated flashy men with expensive cars, and my mother loved every second of it. Whenever Daniel visited, she found ways to insult him. Small comments, little jokes, cruel observations disguised as humor. Daniel always stayed polite, always smiled, always ignored it, which somehow annoyed her even more. Then one evening, Daniel proposed, and I said yes. It was the easiest decision of my life. We didn't want a huge wedding. We couldn't afford one anyway. We wanted something simple, a small ceremony, close friends, close family. A beautiful day focused on love instead of appearances. My mother hated the idea, absolutely hated it. She spent months criticizing every decision. The venue was too small, the guest list was too short, the decorations were too simple, the dress wasn't expensive enough, nothing was good enough. Then came the wedding day, and things got even worse. The ceremony was held at a small countryside venue. Beautiful gardens, string lights, fresh flowers, everything looked perfect, at least to me. But the moment my mother arrived, she started complaining, loudly, so loudly that other guests could hear her. "This is it?" She laughed, actually laughed. Then she looked around and said, "This wedding looks like a backyard barbecue." Several guests looked uncomfortable. I wanted to disappear, but she wasn't finished. A few minutes later, she found a group of relatives and started mocking the wedding again, calling it cheap, calling it embarrassing, calling it pathetic. Then came the comment I'll never forget. She raised her glass and said, "I suppose this is what happens when you marry a man with no future." The room became silent. My face burned with humiliation. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to react. But he simply squeezed my hand and smiled, like he knew something nobody else knew. That smile confused me. At the time, I didn't understand it, but later, everything would make sense. The ceremony began. I walked down the aisle, and despite everything, it felt magical. Because when I looked at Daniel, nothing else mattered. Not my mother, not the comments, not the embarrassment, just us. We exchanged vows, said "I do," and became husband and wife. For a few hours, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Because during the reception, a guest arrived, a guest my mother never expected to see. And the moment she recognized him, the color drained from her face, because suddenly, the man she'd spent years mocking didn't look poor anymore. The reception had just begun. People were laughing, talking, taking pictures. For the first time all day, I was actually relaxing. Then I noticed something strange. Daniel checked his watch, twice. Then he looked toward the entrance, almost as if he was waiting for someone. I didn't think much of it, until a black luxury SUV pulled into the venue, then another, and another. Several guests noticed immediately, including my mother. Her eyes narrowed, because the vehicles looked completely out of place. This wasn't the kind of wedding where people arrived in cars like that. A few seconds later, 3 men stepped out. Expensive suits, professional appearance, serious expressions. The entire reception became quiet. Nobody knew who they were, except Daniel, because he smiled the moment he saw them. And suddenly, I realized these weren't random guests. They were here for him. One of the men walked directly toward Daniel. Then something happened that confused everyone. The man shook Daniel's hand. Not casually, respectfully. Very respectfully. The kind of respect employees show a boss. Then he said, "Congratulations, sir." "Sir?" I saw my mother's expression change immediately. Then more guests arrived. Business owners, executives, professionals, one after another. Every single person seemed to know Daniel, and every single person treated him with enormous respect. My mother looked completely confused, because the image she'd created of Daniel didn't match reality anymore. Then things became even stranger. One of the guests approached me. He smiled warmly, then said, "You have no idea how lucky you are." I laughed. "I know." The man smiled. "No. You really don't." Then he walked away. Now I was confused too. A little later, dinner began. Guests took their seats, and that's when the biggest surprise arrived. The master of ceremonies walked onto the stage, then made an announcement. "I'd like to invite someone special to say a few words." I assumed it would be a family member, maybe Daniel's uncle, maybe one of his friends. Instead, the MC said a name that made half the room gasp, including my mother. Because the person walking toward the microphone was one of the most successful business leaders in the state, a man regularly featured in newspapers, television interviews, business magazines. My mother's face went white, absolutely white, because she recognized him immediately. Everyone did. The businessman smiled, then looked directly at Daniel, and said, "Most people know me as CEO of Parker Global Industries." The room listened carefully. Then he continued, "But tonight I'm not here as a CEO." He pointed toward Daniel. "I'm here because this young man helped build everything we have today." Silence. Complete silence. The businessman continued. 5 years ago, our company was struggling. We were losing money. We were losing clients. And we were losing hope. Then he smiled. That's when Daniel arrived. I looked at my husband, completely stunned, because he'd never told me any of this, not once. The businessman continued. The strategies that saved our company came from him. The expansion that doubled our profits came from him. The growth everyone credits me for was his idea. The room exploded into whispers. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. Neither could I. Then came the biggest revelation. The businessman laughed, then said, "Frankly, if Daniel ever wanted my job, I'd probably give it to him." Everyone laughed, except my mother. She looked terrified, because suddenly, the man she'd spent years calling a failure wasn't a failure at all, not even close, and the surprises weren't finished, not even close, because moments later, someone handed Daniel a small envelope, an envelope he'd apparently been waiting for. He opened it, read it, then smiled. A very calm smile. The same smile he gave me when my mother mocked him earlier. And at that moment, I finally understood. Daniel knew something huge, something he hadn't told anyone, not even me. And whatever was inside that envelope was about to change everything, especially for my mother. The reception hall was silent. Everyone was staring at Daniel, including me, because nobody knew what was inside the envelope. Daniel calmly folded the paper, then stood up and walked toward the stage. My mother watched every step. Her face looked pale. The confidence she'd carried all day was gone, completely gone. Daniel took the microphone. The room became silent again. Then he smiled. Not an arrogant smile, not a revenge smile, just a calm smile. The kind of smile people have when they no longer need to prove anything. Then he spoke. Most of you know me as Emily's husband. A few people laughed. Then he continued. But tonight, I suppose it's time everyone learns who I really am. The room froze. Even I stopped breathing. Because whatever came next, I had never heard it before either. Daniel looked toward the businessman who had spoken earlier, then nodded. The businessman smiled and gave him permission to continue. Daniel took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I sold a technology company. Silence, complete silence. My mother's eyes widened. Daniel continued. The company was purchased by a major investment group. I signed a confidentiality agreement, and I wasn't allowed to discuss it publicly. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Then Daniel said the number that changed everything. The sale was worth $48 million. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, shock. People couldn't believe it. Neither could I. Because Daniel never told me. Not once. Not because he didn't trust me. Because he hated attention. He hated people judging others based on money. And now I finally understood why he drove an old truck. Why he dressed simply. Why he never talked about wealth. He wanted people to see who he was, not what he owned. Then Daniel continued. After the sale, I spent several years investing in smaller businesses. Some succeeded. Some failed. But I was fortunate enough to build a life I enjoy. The room remained frozen. My mother looked like she might faint. Because everything she believed about Daniel was wrong. Every insult, every joke, every cruel comment. Wrong. Then Daniel looked directly at her. Not angrily, not hatefully, just honestly. And that's what made it hurt even more. You spent years believing success had a certain appearance. Silence. You believed expensive cars meant character. You believed luxury meant value. You believed money determined worth. The room became uncomfortable, because everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. My mother lowered her eyes, for the first time all day. Then Daniel continued. But the most successful thing I've ever done, he looked at me, was marrying Emily. I immediately started crying. So did several guests, because everyone knew it was true. The room erupted into applause, long applause, the kind that comes from genuine emotion. But Daniel wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed another document, the same document from the envelope. Then he smiled. This arrived today. The room became curious again. Daniel continued. My newest company was officially valued this morning. Everyone waited. Then he revealed the number. Over $100 million. The room exploded again. Several guests actually stood up. Others looked completely stunned. My mother covered her mouth. Because suddenly, the pathetic little wedding she mocked had become the wedding everyone would remember. Not because of money, because of how wrong she had been. Then something unexpected happened. My mother stood up, slowly, very slowly, and walked toward us. The entire room watched. Nobody knew what she would say, not even me. She stopped directly in front of Daniel, then turned toward me. Tears filled her eyes. Real tears, not dramatic tears, not attention-seeking tears, regretful tears. Then she whispered, I was wrong. The room became silent, because nobody expected those words, especially not from her. Then she looked at me, and said something I had waited my entire life to hear. "I'm sorry." I couldn't speak, not immediately, because for years, I wanted that apology. For years, I dreamed about hearing those words, and now they were finally here. Then she continued, "I spent so much time comparing you to everyone else that I forgot to appreciate the daughter I already had." Tears rolled down my face, because despite everything, that was all I ever wanted. Not money, not revenge, just acknowledgement, just love, just acceptance. Then I hugged her, and the entire room burst into applause. Months later, life was better than ever. Not because Daniel was wealthy, because the truth finally came out, because appearances stopped mattering, because people finally learned a lesson. Never judge someone's worth by what they own, and never underestimate someone simply because they choose humility. Today, Daniel and I are happily married. We still live simply, still drive practical cars, still focus on family instead of status. And every time I think about my wedding day, I remember one thing. The people who laughed the loudest were the most shocked when the truth arrived. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional family dramas, shocking betrayals, powerful revenge stories, and unforgettable endings. Because sometimes, the people who look ordinary are living extraordinary lives. The end.